Michael Olson disappeared in December of 1979, and today our friends at Adventures with Purpose released a video of their search for him. It's a search we helped with, and you're not going to want to miss the added information we have to share. Hey everybody, welcome to Profiling Evil in this special edition. Take a moment if you would, hit that like and subscribe button, and make sure you're sharing us with all your friends. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't notice, I'm wearing our new tees. Take a moment, look at our merchandise, especially this cool new t-shirt with the See No Evil, Say No Evil, and Speak No Evil logo on the back. Today, Adventures with Purpose released their search video in the missing persons case of Michael Olson. Jared Lysick reached out to me before they took off on this journey and asked if I could look into the case and give my perspective based on the 40 plus years I've spent looking at cold cases. Now, Olson was last seen in West Palm Beach, Florida on December 1st, 1979. That is a long time ago. This kid's a native from Minnesota and was a student at the University of Minnesota. He'd taken a job at a swanky golf course down there and was working as a bag boy in West Palm Beach, Florida. He was temporarily staying at a Howard Johnson's hotel while he looked for more permanent housing. So take a minute, join my friend Taylor Nicholas of TGI Crime Day as we do a little deeper dive into this case, and we provide Jared Lysick and Doug Bishop with a little more information to aid them in their search. Now, we were lucky in this case because the chief of police in West Palm Beach is a personal friend of mine. So thanks for making your team available, Chief. And Jared, thanks for all the support from the AW team and the chance to weigh in on another case in your portfolio.
Michael John Olson was settling into his new life in Palm Beach, Florida in 1979. He had recently moved from his hometown of Edina or Edina. If you're from Minnesota, please let us know. I heard it pronounced both ways. Edina, Edina. I think they're both beautiful names. Potato. Maybe you just say it differently depending where you're from. Let's see. Michael was 20 years old, and he decided to take some time away from college where he was studying business. He had just purchased a brand new 1979 Pontiac Grand Prix, and he started working at the President Country Club where he was making new friends and really enjoying himself learning about more of the golfing side of things. His mom said that he loved to golf, so this was a great place for him to work. On November 30th, it was his day off. It was a Friday, and he had spent the day golfing and hanging out with his friends. That evening, they went out to bet on the dog races at a track that was near the hotel he was temporarily staying until he found a permanent apartment in Florida. Around 2 a.m., Michael and his friends went to a bar to watch a boxing match that night, and that ended around 4 a.m. Michael said goodbye to his friend, telling him he would see him at work later that day. When Michael didn't show up for his shift, his friend called the hotel and he got no answer. I'm guessing that at that point, maybe he thought he had just overslept. They were out all night the night before and then he had to go to work, which is something I cannot do. To be 20.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I don't know that I ever could do that.
Me
That's
either.
an amazing schedule he's got there.
So after his friend called the hotel and didn't get an answer, he decided to just go over to the hotel and see what was going on, make sure everything was okay. But when he got there, Michael wasn't there and his car wasn't there. So the hotel ended up calling police thinking that maybe he had checked out early and skipped out on his bill. But when they unlocked his room, they saw that all of his things were still there. When he missed another shift at work the next day, Michael's boss at the country club called his parents and reported him missing.
You know, this is really interesting because, again, I mean, you just mentioned the kind of things that he was doing in a 24-hour period of time. This is a 20-year-old that's living on his own for the first time, and he is a long way from home. He has no oversight, nobody just kind of helping him get through the bumps in the road. He's staying in a hotel room, so he doesn't have any responsibilities like having to go clean and cook and other kinds of things. He's in this hotel while he's looking for permanent housing, but he's also doing something kind of intriguing. He's living a country club lifestyle on an hourly wage job. And you think about that, the challenges that alone would have being around people who are dropping 50 or $100 on lunch and he's living on an hourly wage. Well, the night before he disappears, reportedly, he cashes a check and along with the funds that he already had, he heads out to the dog track to bet and party with his friends. Now, most people would think that's a pretty full night. He's driving around in this brand new Pontiac that you talked about. It's a sporty little car, but it's also probably a pretty reasonably priced and economical car. I mean, I remember when that car came out, it was a flashy looking little car, but it was really pretty reasonably priced. I'm sure his parents played some role in picking out and probably financing that vehicle. But after he spent some time with his buddies at the dog track, they decide to go to a bar and they sit at the bar throughout the night. They're watching fights in one bar and they end up bar hopping until 4 o'clock in the morning. And the only reason they call it quits is because that's when all the bars shut their doors and say, get out. Now, I talk a lot about risk and the role that we take as human beings in increasing or decreasing our level of risks. Olson's parents are publicly saying that they're sure he wasn't drunk. I don't know that I can even begin to accept that as a possibility when he's been out drinking all day and all night going from bar to bar. Maybe he is the kind that goes there and has a ginger ale, and we have to certainly give him the benefit of the doubt. But one buddy is quoted as saying he doesn't drink that much. Well, that always becomes an interesting thing when you ask someone, how much have you had? And they say, not much. And it's enough that puts them over the legal limit of alcohol consumption. It, and I also remember from my old patrol days, especially arresting drunks after the bars closed, that when people are consuming alcohol, the first thing that disappears, besides their money, is their judgment. And I'll tell you what, I remember being a 20-year-old kid. Now, I'm not convinced that this group of guys were intoxicated or weren't intoxicated. And I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I find myself leaning toward more that they had been doing quite a bit of drinking. Now, I'm going to return to this line of thinking in a minute.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from Profiling Evil. I've been studying criminal behavior for more than 40 years, and one of my favorite research tools is Truthfinder. It's online, and you're not going to believe the information stored there. So if you want to know more about that new neighbor, your babysitter, or your next online date, give Truthfinder a try. I'm including a link below with special discount pricing. You got to click the link to get it, and then enter EVIL10 at checkout. We're an affiliate, which means we get a small commission, enough to buy a small Diet Dr. Pepper, but you can cancel at any time. Thanks for listening today.
Is it possible that this is a homicide? Is it possible that it was an accident? And then I got to say, we got to think about, did this kid just get tired of things there and go off and create some new life for himself? A third possibility. Now, I want to quickly mention that the latter, in my opinion, is less likely. I don't think Michael Olson jetted off to start a new life for himself. I mean, he's 20 years old. He escaped mom and dad and was living on his own, living his dream. He was golfing. He was at an expensive golf resort. He was meeting influential people. It just doesn't make sense to me. And when things don't make sense, they usually aren't true. Evidence supports that this kid left everything he had behind in his hotel room. He didn't take his clothing, he didn't take personal items, and he didn't use his credit cards or make bank withdrawals or produce any kinds of breadcrumbs that would suggest that he could have gone off and done his own thing. Now, his mom suggests that he had amnesia. And I find myself just wondering, was that because he forgot things, like cleaning his room or something? Or was it diagnosed? Was it a diagnosis that was received by a professional with evidence from previous kinds of events in his life? But with all of that, how do you explain his vehicle never turning up anywhere? I mean, think about this, Taylor. His car wasn't sold somewhere down the road. It wasn't impounded, at least that we know of. And by the way, if police stop a vehicle, they record information on the vehicle's plate number. If a person's missing, like he was, it goes into something called the National Crime Information database. It's called NCIC. And that way, whenever someone pulls a vehicle over and they run a plate, it would say, oh, by the way, so if he's pulled over, it's going to flag his license plate and say, hey, this kid's missing in a different area of the country, and you better check into it more. No, he wasn't issued a citation anywhere that we know of. His vehicle and he simply vanish.
That's the part that always gets me. It seems like there are so many different possibilities of what could have happened, but when you throw the car in there, that's when my mind starts racing. Uh, do you think that it was possible that Michael was maybe murdered in this area?
Yeah, well, it's always a possibility, isn't it? I mean, the family went out and hired a private investigator who theorized that Olson may have been murdered by a serial killer. Now, this one really caught me off guard. The predator that the PI focused on had his preferential victim was females. I only did a cursory examination of this possibility, but it just didn't seem likely to me. I mean, you think about it again, unless he just happened to stumble across the guy and the guy was in a bad mood and decided to kill him. Serial killers are fueled by fantasy, and that fantasy wasn't going out and killing a dumb kid driving down the road. It was more for that particular serial killer that they were focusing on, that he was focused on a certain kind of female and certain kinds of characteristics with her. So for me, having looked at and investigated and interviewed a bucket load of serial killers, I just don't see it happening. Now, what does seem more interesting, though, is that there was a Reddit post shared about how this investigator had theorized that Olson might have been the victim of a robbery, which then led to a murder. Now, you uncovered some things about Olson staying in that hotel and that there were some arguments going on in the parking lot or something, didn't you?
Yes, there was something that was very brief that just mentioned one article where they said that later a PI went and talked to some of the people who were also staying at that hotel at the time, and they said that they had heard arguments in the parking lot, possibly the night that Michael went missing. So it's possible that something happened there at the hotel. Maybe someone followed him from the dog races, or maybe someone just stumbled upon him in the parking lot. But it wasn't something that was talked about very much. And it seems that only a couple of people maybe said that they possibly heard something.
So, in a case like that, I guess the thing that I do is I look at behavior, not just the possibility of whether it could have happened or if this fight that they heard in the parking lot was somehow tied to Michael Olson. Got to think a little more about the behavior, maybe a little differently about the behavior. For something like this to happen, you have to ask yourself, if it was a robbery, was it a planned event where someone was patiently following this guy from bar to bar? Because again, I mean, we know he spent till 4 o'clock in the morning. He left his buddies somewhere between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning. That's a really patient criminal to drive around all night and wait for this kid to quit drinking and head back, and then take him down in the parking lot of this hotel. I just don't see an opportunistic offender taking that kind of time, spending that much patience. I think they would probably pick a much better location somewhere along the line. And then I guess I'm going to go back to a question I've asked you before, Taylor, and that is, okay, so it did happen. So he was the victim of a robbery. What happened to him and what happened to his car? Because if it happened in that parking lot, that seems like an awful lot of work to go and load him up and take his vehicle somewhere and make it disappear. What are your thoughts?
I think it goes back to what you talked about earlier with the NCIC. So if someone had taken him and taken his car, where did they take it? And how were there no witnesses? Even though it was about 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, there still could have been people that were in that area. It was a hotel parking lot. It's not like he was in a deserted alley somewhere with his car, unless they somehow followed him from dropping off his friend all the way to the hotel and then approached him. That just doesn't seem very likely to me. And again, if they did, getting rid of a car is a lot of work. And it would be a pretty hard thing now that it's like 5, 6 in the morning. Soon the sun's going to be up. There are going to be people around. So you don't have much time to get rid of evidence in a situation like that. It just seems less likely to me that someone took him and his car and then put him where? Because again, if he had gotten pulled over in another state, or if the person who stole his car got pulled over or had some kind of a citation, then it would have been very easy to figure out that that was not Michael and that this car was stolen.
Yeah, and during that time, I mean, some investigators argued that it's possible the vehicle could have been salvaged, cut up, taken away. Again, that's a really coordinated effort. And why would you kill someone if it was 5 o'clock in the morning and they knew he was going into the hotel room? You know that the guy has been out all night. Even if you're following him, you're going to wait till he falls asleep and take the car. If that's the case, I don't know. I just don't buy it. So it causes me to keep going back to the thought that Michael Olson simply was a victim of an accident. And again, I wonder what role alcohol may have played in the accident, if he was impaired or not. Because when you're impaired, you can do all kinds of crazy things. You can miss curves. You can drive through intersections. You can drive into canals and lakes and rivers and off cliffs. You can turn the wrong way and think you're going the right way. You know, it just doesn't make sense. And frankly, it got to keep thinking about it. This kid could have just gone off of one of these canals and be hiding right under our noses, 10 feet down in one of the many waterways that are around that area. It wouldn't be the first time that Adventures with Purpose found a missing person in an area that had been checked and rechecked and checked again. And I know police reports are that we've checked all the waterways. How many times have we heard that? 21 to date in the last 2 years, when they found the body in the same place that law enforcement or others have looked before.
Exactly. And I also think that uh, the technology has changed so much since then. So I would be really interested to know if there has been searches done within the last decade or the last, I mean, even 15 years, 20 years. If this happened in 1980, that's there's been so many advancements in technology that maybe back when they first started looking, there's things that are hidden right under our noses all the time. And that's where that needle in a haystack comes in. And AWP does such a good job with those specific kinds of cases. I will tell you there's something interesting about this area. So, this particular area of West Palm Beach was not the safest place to be while Michael was living there in the 70s. There was quite a bit of crime happening in the area, and by the end of the 80s, it had the highest crime rate for a city of its size. Michael's parents, John and Sue, visited West Palm Beach twice to talk to law enforcement. And the first time they went, there were 7 murders in that area just in that week. And then the second time they went, there had been 5 in that week. So to me, if there's that many things happening, I feel like it would be really easy for a one off case like this to get lost in that shuffle. John theorized that maybe Michael witnessed a crime or someone wanted to steal his car and maybe the cash he was carrying around. No one really knows how much was won or lost at the dog races, but maybe he won a bunch of money, and we know that he had cashed a check earlier that day. I don't know how anyone in a restaurant or a bar would know that about him, but that is one of the things that his parents thought was a possibility. And like we said, there were searches done of the canals and ditches in this area, but there was absolutely nothing found. Okay, Mike, map it out for me. What does this area look like when it comes to keeping someone in their car hidden for this long?
Yeah, boy, and we got to pull out the crystal geographic ball here.
Yes.
But I got to mention this. I was really excited that we were looking at this case because the chief of police in West Palm Beach is a friend of mine. We've been friends for more than 10 years. I think probably more like 14 years. He is a pro, and he leads in a way that these detectives have everything they need in order to look into this case. I'm really excited knowing that Chief Adderley's at the helm there, because he came after this happened. he is the kind of guy that will keep these cold cases alive, and that's really good news for not only the AWP team, but for Michael Olson's family. It breathes new life into the case. Again, that new set of eyes. But let's just take a moment and look at the map. So the thing that I found so interesting about this particular case was, quite frankly, just to first look at each of the areas in detail. Number one, we know the hotel location and where this young man was living. The hotel has a couple of interesting things about it that I found could influence this particular case. The first is that getting into the hotel requires a U-turn if you're heading eastbound on the 704. Or it requires making a turn about 8 blocks ahead of the hotel and driving to the north and coming in through the back of the hotel. But that's the first and foremost thing, is that it creates kind of an interesting way in and out of the hotel. And again, think about the inebriated state that this boy could have possibly been in, having to negotiate and make turn decisions like that. Now, we know by looking at all of the information online that they spent a great deal of time at the dog track. They went bar hopping after that, and they spent most of the evening going through a series of bars along this road right here. What I found interesting, and is not talked about much, is that at the end of that night, Michael takes his friend back to the Baptist church where he has a car parked. This is the last place he's seen. And not once have I heard anyone talk about this canal behind the Baptist church. And that really stuck out to me. And I think it's an area that Doug Bishop and the team need to look at first and foremost when they get there, because we know that he was seen there. We have no question that that was the last place that he was seen. Now, when we look at cars in the area, just kind of take a look at this car right here in the parking lot of the Baptist church, and then look at the size of that canal, Taylor. It all of a sudden is kind of feasible that a vehicle could go in there and disappear. Now, I don't know how deep these are, but I'm going to just stop right there for a second. What do you think about that idea right there?
Yeah, being able to see the size comparison of the cars to that canal, when you're looking at it from so far above like that, it doesn't seem like it's that big. And my mind kind of went, there is a canal there, but do you think a car would fit in it? And as soon as you zoomed in and you see the size of that car, even though it might seem like that's such an obvious place to look, maybe it didn't get checked because it seemed so obvious. I also think that the idea of them like parking at that Baptist church, I saw somewhere that people would do that regularly because it was free to park there. So rather than have to pay to park at like near the bars or at the dog track, they would just park at this Baptist church and kind of walk where they needed to go. I think that, if it's the end of the night, you just dropped off your friends. Everyone's probably exhausted at that point. I don't know how you wouldn't be by 5 a.m. If he drops his friends off, that's something as easy as, maybe being a little bit complacent, kind of on autopilot, know that you know exactly where you're supposed to go. And then, like you said, sometimes even just being sleep deprived, you start making weird decisions. I know that there have been many times I've missed a turn near my house when I am stone cold sober. So trying to navigate that so late at night after being out all night and hanging out all day, it would be very easy to make that mistake of taking a wrong turn out of that parking lot and ending up in that water.
Yeah, there you go. So let's just kind of theorize for a moment. Let's zoom back into that Baptist church, and he would have undoubtedly had to have either gone into the canal right behind it, or come out onto Cherry Road, and from there head over to Congress. And Congress is the street with the purple dots on it going north and south here. Now, again, think about this inebriated, possibly inebriated state and making the wrong choice. Or I'm going to even add a little bit of intrigue to this. Think about this from the perspective that he knows that he's had a little bit to drink, still feels like he has control of all of his senses, but doesn't want to be on a major thoroughfare that has bars all up and down it where the cops might be parking and watching for people that are drunk drivers. Let's just think about that for a second and think, is it possible that he could have taken an alternate route through a less traveled part of town and made his way home, which then takes us along areas like the canal in this location, which again, I think needs to be searched. From there, as we continue up the road, he gets up to where he has to make a little dog leg. And this is where I want to zoom out for a minute because this is a confluence of roads that are important. If he had turned left coming out of the Baptist church rather than right, he would have gone up North Congress all the way to 704 and then turned right. At this intersection that we've highlighted with a purple dot and a red dash dot line, two possible routes, he had a decision to make. Does he try to turn left and go up to the north side of the hotel up here? Or does he continue to go east on 704 and make the U-turn, which then puts him in a position where he's really close to this, let me just get this name here. I got it, to Clear Lake, and a possibility that he could have ended up in Clear Lake on one side or the other. But again, since it's an orange star, I kind of put it less likely, but he has to go that way to make a U-turn to come back and be able to enter into the Howard Johnson Hotel where he's staying. Now, if he were to take that road to the west and try to come in behind Staples and Michael's and that shopping center that you see here, a couple of interesting things happen right here as we zoom in. If he doesn't make that turn, he all of a sudden is facing one more interesting canal and another area that I think the AWP team needs to give some consideration to. But now let's assume that he actually navigates it one way or another, and he ends up at the hotel, at the back side of the hotel, and is ready to park. Look at this huge body of water that's directly behind the hotel too, that you don't see when you're looking on it from a map up here. You just kind of see this big parking area and everything else. So by being able to look at some of the aerial imagery, we start to zoom in and get a little better idea. Now, that goes around to the east side. Again, it's going to take a little cross-country driving, but if this kid's intoxicated or out of his mind, it all of a sudden becomes a whole lot more interesting than it was before. So looking at geography, I think makes a difference. If not, it forces us to ask a couple of questions that maybe we wouldn't ask otherwise.
So I do find it interesting. It seems like I read in one article that was talking about how different this area is compared to when he went missing back in the 80s. At the time, there weren't as many businesses around it. So whereas now, when you look at that area and you think about that parking lot that would have those big stadium lights, before, when they didn't really have that, that hotel was almost kind of by itself in that little corner. So it would be very easy for that to be very dark. And especially, like you said, that that canal, that pond that's right behind it, you don't see it from clear up above on a map. So it's definitely possible that you would not see that in the dark. I don't know. There are so many possibilities. I don't know how they narrow it down and decide where to begin. And that's why this is my part of the job. And our guys get to go out and do the legwork and find those needle in a haystack cases. It's so fascinating. Thank you for doing those maps for us.
No, I mean, yeah. So in recap, I mean, there's a couple places that are really intriguing. That West Palm Beach Canal, just north of the Baptist Church, cannot be ignored. The canal located just northwest of the Howard Johnson Hotel can't be ignored. The canal and the pond right behind the Howard Johnsons can't be ignored. And that Clear Lake in the area where he might have made a U-turn as a possibility needs to be considered. But it's all going to make a big difference when Doug Bishop and the team get there on the ground and look at these things with their eyes. Understand what the depths are of these things. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
I always smile when we're told up front that we're never going to find anything and we prove them wrong. Once again, you did it. You got a secret sauce and a whole bunch of heavenly support. Hey, I want to thank Taylor Nicholas of TGI Crime Day. Hey, make sure you're subscribing to her channel, folks. And thanks to each of you for tuning in and supporting us here at Profiling Evil. You know, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be starting our next series in the Profiling Evil Academy. And if you'd like to be the first to get our videos and instructional information, go over and join our channel memberships. The information and links are down below. And please stop right now. Hit that like and subscribe button. Ring the bell. Make sure you're getting all the notifications, and share Profiling Evil with your friends and everybody you associate with. And remember, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you like podcasts, you can find Profiling Evil on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again, folks, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.